What's up, folks? This is Kyle Thomas from Exhorter, and you're watching Aftershocks TV.
All right, Matt and Chris back here for another episode this week of Aftershocks TV. Thanks for everyone tuning in. What's going on, Chris? Man, I got to say, I love that background of yours. It kind of looks familiar to me. Reminds me of someone else that we have on Aftershocks.
Well, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I'm trying to fit back in. I know I helped start the show, but I feel like an outsider now. And I thought that was like part of the motif, is that you have to support Randy Blythe. Isn't that part of the gig?
It's actually the total opposite of that. You gotta hate him. You know what I mean? For me, but that's my.
Oh well, then screw him. Screw him.
Fuck him. You're just biting off of Tom, Chris. Come on, you got to come up with your own material, man. What's going on, dude?
Well, Tom's an innovator in this business.
I mean, Thin Lizzy, and then now Lamb of God.
That's right. And now what are we going to talk about? Thin Lizzy and Lamb of God. So when you're listening to Burn the Priest, how does that relate to Armed and Dangerous to you, Matt?
Yeah, good old Randy Blythe. Yeah, Lamb of God. Well, I mean, we don't talk too much Lamb of God here, but I did like that old Burn the Priest stuff. So I will say the early stuff.
And the first album was real good. Was it something about the chapel?
Yeah.
And I liked Sacrament. That's about where I jumped off, though. Yeah,
same here.
After that, it was like, here's Lamb of God pretending they're Lamb of God. Same 10 songs over and over and over.
Thing. Yeah, man. Never changed it up. That's the only thing. But whatever. Not here to talk about Lamb of God. We're actually, we were getting ready. We were going to do this episode before we had an interview scheduled with a big, a band in the early 90s called Life, Sex, and Death, the guitarist Alex Kane. A band that, it's one of those polarizing bands, right? You either love that band, really, like, I do love them. I love the whole Stanley thing. I loved it all. Or you just didn't get it and you completely hated the band. It was just one of those love-hate kind of bands. And, a band that came around, I'll just pop it up here just for people who haven't seen it before. 1992 it came out. It was really right in the middle of that, like, it was right after Nevermind came out. It was like the same time, and this band had like a blend of, heavy grunge, some metal in there too, but then it had a lot of still hair metal vibes in there, in their sound. And I think it was one of, I'm going to talk to Alex about that, hopefully tomorrow. It got rescheduled, but I think that's one of the reasons this band didn't really take off, is because there was just too much hair metal, too much of that 80s glam stuff in it, which I like and really enjoy. But at that time, nobody wanted to hear it. Everybody wanted it, just nothing to do with it. I remember getting this album, not realizing why the fuck it didn't take off with the song Tank. Y'all All Assholes, a great song. But then once I heard the first single they put out, Schools for Fools, I said, whoa. This is why they didn't take off, but nonetheless, it's a very cult band. People still are discovering this album because now people do want to hear that. They want to hear that. They want to hear a blend of all the '80s and early '90s stuff, but just that they didn't really want to do it. They weren't into it. And I think that's one of the reasons. I
know. I was telling you, I remember the record, but I have no memory of the band. Like, none. Really? My only memory of the band is I heard them once or twice, and I was like, yeah, I like Warrior Soul better.
Really?
That was really about what I heard. I heard it, and I was like, oh, I can listen to Warrior Soul, or I can listen to this. I'll take the Warrior Soul. But by that time, I think I was a very typical guy at that time, or kid, or whatever, because I was all in on Soundgarden, Nirvana, 92, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was still buying the occasional, LA Guns record or whatever, but, and I was even last gasping at that point with, like, Guns N' Roses. Use Your Illusion, I was like, what happened to this great band? There was a lot of that going on. And I think people forget that, man, is that the bands that we loved, that's the unwritten part of it. Everybody says, well, the sound changed. The sound changed, and Nirvana, this and that. What people forget to tell you is, well, the bands that were our favorites, they also changed right about that time, and most of them beforehand. You know, if you think the two biggest records of the 80s bands that lived on, Metallica and Guns N' Roses, and you're looking at the Black Album, while huge, total different sound.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, Use Your Illusions, which has some good moments, but has such a mishmash of Back to the Garden of Eden, you know, crap like that. It's just, you know, Beat the Dead Horse and all that. You know, it's like, okay, I need something fresh, and here's something fresh. You know, the 80s bands kind of opened the door.
Well, it did, and like you said, I mean, I think you know, Appetite for Destruction really kicked off that, you know, getting away from the hair, more into the sleaze cock rock. And so, you know, and this is a band, Life, Sex, and Death. They were a total hair band out of Chicago. I mean, if you go look, they got a video up there from, I think it was 89, called American Noise. It was straight up, you know, Poison type of stuff. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But of course, now, I think you said it right around that time, I think when Guns N' Roses got used, you started seeing, like you just mentioned, a band, Warrior Soul, right?
Yeah.
That was part of that. Exactly. That was in New York, part of that early 90s thing, along with like, Cycle Sluts from Hell and Circus of Power and that whole scene, Raging Slab. And then, like you said, LA still had LA Guns. And then you had a Life, Sex, and Death. They were from Chicago, but they relocated to LA. It was just that, okay, Nevermind just came out and was taking people, you know, taking things by storm. But obviously these bands were signed right before that, were recording their records when Nevermind came out. And so it was like, you know, that was an overnight thing, right? Everyone knows that. That was an overnight, just boom, you guys are all done. Anything to do with the 80s, any little power ballad, anything that was remotely, you know, linked to that, people just were like, I mean, once you heard any of that, you just were like, get the fuck away from me.
Right.
I want nothing to do with that. And listen, I was like that too, as much as I loved that's, you know, I love that sleaze rock stuff. Don't get me wrong. I loved it. I was ready for something like everybody else. I was ready for something else because MTV just threw it in our faces just nonstop for like 8 years. And it was just, we were all burnt on it. And so like this album, this Life, Sex, and Death album, I mean, it's got really heavy shit on there. I mean, some really heavy fucking songs, but then it's got that sleaze rock stuff. And to me, it's like, even though it really was, if you listen to it, it was really an alternative fucking record because it had some odd stuff too. It was almost like a Faith No More thing.
Sure.
With too much of the 80s. You know, once you heard it, you just didn't want to give it a chance. And I think that's what kind of did it in, even though I do think it's a fucking phenomenal record.
Sure.
You know?
And the other thing that it has that, and this is going to be a terrible comparison, and I know this, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, so that people can relate it to something sort of modern, I guess, even though this band's starting to get long in the tooth too.
Oh, yeah.
They remind me in the way with the singer of like Volbeat, when Volbeat came up. Not sound-wise, but in this singer sounds like nothing else.
Sure.
So because just like you know, like what's his name, Michael Paulson sounds like nobody else.
Oh, I don't know about
sort
that.
of Danzig, Elvis.
Life Agony. That was my first thing when I heard it. Life Agony. He has that early.
Yeah, maybe okay.
I mean, that's
it meets Pearl Jam, meets Elvis, meets a lot.
Johnny
it's
Cash, whatever.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of mishmashy stuff that doesn't sound like anybody else that's doing it today. I guess I should have said.
Sure.
You know, when you look at all the other modern rock metal bands that came out at the same time as Volbeat, none of them sound like that.
No, he didn't. You're right.
And I think that might have been something with this Life, Sex, and Death band as well. Is that Stanley, the singer, you know, he's got a voice that's his. And nobody did it then. I don't think nobody's done it since. Absolutely
not. You know, and that's what it comes down to. That's what we're going to talk about today. You know, because Stanley now from Life, Sex, or Death. For people that don't know, I mean, that was pretty much, and that was part of that was one of the reasons or things that, you know, people wondered why the band didn't take off because their songs were great. Now, listen, Life, Sex, and Death, you can go. I mean, you know, our great late friend Bob Nalbandian, you know, talked about them. I remember I asked him about them, and he said they were a fucking phenomenal live band, and that's what everybody said. I mean, you could go on, you know, YouTube, all these social media sites. There are so many people that are on there going, dude, this was the best live band I've ever seen. You know, and one of the reasons was they had, you know, quote unquote gimmick.
Okay.
And so Stanley was, so I mean, so when the bands, when they were a hair metal band back in Chicago, like you said, they were just a typical hair metal band. He was a regular singer, sang in a high pitch and everything. And then this band, like a lot of those bands had to do, they reinvented themselves completely. And he came up with this sort of now character called Stanley. The guy's name is Chris Stan. That's his real name, I guess.
Okay.
And he basically, Stanley was this character on stage, and he dressed up pretty much like he never changed his clothes. He looked like a homeless guy, ripped clothes, greasy hair, and he smelled like shit. Everyone just said like it was legit. He fucking smelled.
Like he was but he was or was not homeless, or is that the mystery?
Well, that's the thing, is was the mystique around it, right? I mean, the band would say, this isn't a gimmick, it's not an act. The backstory on Stanley was, in real life, supposedly he's from a very affluent family, okay, in real life. Mm-hmm. And I guess there was, this is stuff we'll obviously, talk to Alex about a little bit, when we do interview him, if we do. But his father passed away, but his father didn't want him doing the rock and roll shit, being a kid, and told him like he's going to wind up being a bum.
Okay.
Doing it. And I guess his father passed away soon after that, right around the time or before the band, he started doing the Stanley character. And it revolved around something along those lines about being, and so he decided, I guess, he was going to make this character and be this, bum-looking guy. He smelled like shit. So what he would do was, before the shows, he'd be outside the club, just hanging around, asking people for change, and being Stanley out there, being a homeless, smelly-ass fucking bum. And so people would be like, look at this fucking guy. So before, obviously, this guy now would enter the club when they're about to go on, and they'd go on stage thinking, all right, this guy's going to get kicked off. What the fuck's this guy doing up there?
Sure.
And then, boom, they go into it. And this guy's got a fucking incredible voice, and he could fucking, I mean, he was a talented guy. I mean, you ask a lot of people. I never seen him live, but if you watch videos, I mean, the guy could move up there. He had those, Scott Weiland / Axl Rose type of moves physically, and he had fucking great pipes. And like you said, he had his own thing. He had this sort of, voice that he went into this character, the Stanley guy. And so that's the backstory. Originally the band was, Warner Brothers had, they tried to go with the whole mystique. Well, they found him, he walked, stumbled into their practice pad one day, and he tried out, just did some singing. They were like, wow, you got a great voice and blah, blah, blah. There was all those things going on. But essentially the band just said, they didn't, back in the early days when the album came out, obviously they didn't want to give up the gimmick, right? There was a mystique that was built around it. But what's really impressive about it is that, if you think of gimmicks, all these years, I mean, there's been plenty of gimmicks, right? I mean, we can go through a ton of them, starting with Kiss and David Bowie. You go back to the 70s. I mean, we, Slipknot up to recent, the 90s. But the interesting thing about his gimmick is he still doesn't, he doesn't do interviews. Okay. Even when he was with the band, he was a withdrawing guy in the band. And Alex was the guy who basically was the spokesperson, and Stanley would do his fucking thing. He'd speak a little bit, but go do his his act. And this guy, I guess, never came out of character. So even in Hollywood, he would sit there and walk the streets as Stanley. Right. He'd hang out as Stanley. He'd be in a rehearsal practice. He'd be Stanley. Nobody ever saw him anything other than Stanley. Now, he wasn't homeless. That was, I guess, something that was in the press. They said he was homeless, but the band said, no, we never said he was homeless. But he didn't change his clothes, and he did smell like shit. I mean, his character was his character, but he wasn't homeless.
Sure.
But like I said, this guy has never come out and did an interview on his character. I mean, look, even Ghost, Tobias Forge, eventually he came out, right? And
sure.
He's done, I mean, he still gets up in character. Everyone knows who he is, and they know, obviously, it's a gimmick. But the Stanley thing is no one really knows. Now, I guess recently, within the last about 10 years ago or so, and it's on Facebook. It's on like a Life, Sex, and Death fan page. There's a couple of videos where he was at, I guess, is the Farm Rock. It was some festival back in 2014 in Illinois that he went to, and they got him on camera.
Okay. And
Chips Enough's there and saying, taking pictures with him and saying, Stanley, Life, Sex, and Death. And some of the radio guys are going, that's him. So he did get, I guess, a little outed, and everyone got to see the real him. But you can see in those videos, he's like kind of nervous, like he doesn't want to be.
Right.
You know, supposedly he's a business guy now, and I guess maybe either he wants to keep that mystique going, because I got to say it's still going. He makes occasional little clips here,
Sure.
for years as Stanley, and then that's it. But he's never really come out and said, yeah, that was me and why he did it or nothing. So it's still this mystique that's never been sort of, in a way, solved, except for those 2 videos where they kind of
Sure.
had him as being Stanley.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's cool. I mean, I think it's a cool gimmick. I know a lot of people don't like that. They didn't like the Stanley gimmick. They think it's one of the reasons why the band didn't do well, because a lot of the established media. Now, if you go on some of the reviews back in the day, some of the guys fucking rip them to shreds for doing it. Yeah, like, you know that guy Ed Rivadavia? I think Bob used to have him on Skull Sessions. He's the guy that does all the writing for the.
He used to write for my magazine like a million years ago with Music's Bottom Line. Yeah, I know Ed pretty well, actually.
Yeah, he rips him pretty hard about, like, give me a break, like, nice try with this fucking gimmick, like it's not going to work. So there's a lot of reasons, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting with gimmicks. It's like, do they work? I mean, or don't they work? Obviously, they've worked over the years. I mean, I don't know if you're a fan of them or not, but
yeah, you know what? I'm hit or miss with it. I think just in general, I'm hit or miss with it. The music, bottom line is the music's got to be good. I don't care what they look like, what their gimmick is. You know, honestly, I mean, this is a prime example. This band was out there. I was an absolute person that probably should have heard it and just didn't. The gimmick didn't move me enough to go look at it. And but there's been bands over the years, huge band, like, you know, you mentioned Kiss. Not a Kiss fan. I don't give a shit about their gimmick. Bottom line is they write crappy music to me, so it's like I don't really care. But the gimmicks can be fun. I'll tell you a fun story. Chuck Mosley, Faith No More guy.
Sure.
He had a band. He was living here in Cleveland. And he had a band for a minute called Vandals Against Illiteracy.
Okay.
All spelled all wrong. It was like,
the
initials are VUA.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
But it's Vandals Against Illiteracy is what it was supposed to be. So it's all spelled wrong and whatever. So, and it was a really good band. It was like Tim Parnan was in that band, who was also in Substance D and Tough maybe.
Okay.
And Michael Cardelloni played drums in the band from Leonard Skinner or whatever. Or Damn Yankees. You know, I mean, like, it was a legitimate band.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing WMMS at the time, the metal show, we worked out a live show with Vandals Against Illiteracy for here in Cleveland. It was going to be their first Cleveland live show. We were all excited to do this. You know, we packed this club up, you know, for people, because people just want to see Chuck. This dude walks into the room. He's wearing a suit that looks like it's fresh off of a Barney Miller set. Like, just an old man suit.
This is Chuck now.
Chuck, yeah. Big old tie, bow tie.
Yeah, he wore that to the Faith No More reunion thing. Yeah. I know you're talking
bow tie.
Yeah.
Had his hair all in the dreads, pulled back into a ponytail. Had, like, 1985 rappers type of, or Mr. T type of gold on him. Tons of it.
Sure, yeah.
And he was walking around, and people were like, Chuck is, oh, no, I'm Mr. Jackson, or whatever he was saying. He was like, I'm Mr. Jackson. I'm Matt Wardlaw's math teacher. Matt was my co-host. He was introducing himself the whole night as Matt's math teacher.
Okay.
And just because he was playing the gimmick of the lunatic singer guy. And everybody knew who he's Chuck Mosley from Faith No More in a club with 300 people. Everybody in the room knows who he is. That's why they're there.
That's why they're there, yep.
You know, but he just wouldn't come off the gimmick. All the way up until he started playing, and he starts playing, and he's shaking, and all of a sudden the hair's going all over the place, and he's rocking out, and he introduced everybody in the band and himself as Mr. Jackson, Matt Wardlaw's math teacher, from the stage.
That's funny.
It was the goofiest gimmick, but it was fun, you know, and in that case, it was fun. Now, admittedly, it didn't work. I mean, nobody remembers Vandals Against Illiteracy. So,
I mean, that was a more, modern band, right? I mean, it's not something that came out of the days of the golden years of the labels. So unless you were local and probably in Cleveland, probably not a lot of people knew who they were, right?
That's it. I mean, that's it. It was Chuck trying to get back on his feet. It was before he went out and toured.
Okay.
It was just him trying to get back on his feet after a lot of years away from Faith No More. You know, because really after Faith No More, he didn't do anything for a long time.
Yeah.
And this was him getting back on his feet. But I will recommend the record, though, if you could find it. It's called "We'll Rap Over Hard Rock for Food," and it has some like real people on it. It has all the guys from Faith No More. They did a new cover of "We Care a Lot."
Oh, nice.
And then Jonathan Davis appears on it, and John Five appears, like legitimate guys. Mm-hmm. And this was for Chuck, who was hanging out in Cleveland.
Yeah, well, and I think it's. I mean, listen. Obviously, a lot of bands will use gimmicks to just obviously to stand out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just to be like, I mean, obviously, no one wants to just. For the most part, nobody's looking to see. There was a period in time, obviously, with grunge in the '90s, but mostly when you think of rock and everything, even metal, no one wants to see. A guy looking like me right now with a T-shirt and a hat on, going on jeans, going up there and fucking singing, right? I mean, no matter how good the music is, there's got to be just this. Whenever you put a little extra entertainment in there, if you want to call it, I think it's a good thing. Like I said, it doesn't always work. I think you said it depends on what the gimmick is. I like I like the funnier, goofier ones. That's always the gimmick.
Sure.
I enjoyed, and that's why I enjoyed Life, Sex, and Death and the Stanley thing. And listen, I listen. The only reason why I knew about Life, Sex, and Death is because of Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
I mean, they had the song Tank on there, and I remember hearing it going, dude, what the fuck is this, man? This is great shit. And I saw it. I went out and picked up the record, and I remember being like, God, I couldn't believe, like I said, the first couple songs, like, dude, how come this band isn't huge until I heard the 80s, metal influences. Yeah, and I'm like, well, this is a bad move they made. This is what's going to kill them, between that and maybe some people not liking the whole Stanley thing. But you made a good point. The bottom line is, as long as the music can back it up, which I believe, if you listen to that record, if you see that band, if you saw a band live, or you can go and look at it, absolutely 100% it backs it up. But obviously it's timing thing too, right?
It is.
I mean, a lot of it's timing.
And you have to be perceived as original. Like, I mean, most people will forget this band as a gimmick band, but Korn was really a gimmick band with the Adidas and with the sweatsuits and with the,
they would call it pimp rock.
Yeah, they were fairly gimmicky at first, but the music backed it. But do you remember all the bands that came after them that also then tried to have the gimmick, and they all failed miserably? The mindless self-indulgences of the world.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, they were terrible. They had a gimmick which got them fans.
Sure.
And they had a cult following, but they were terrible.
Yep.
And another band, I actually like this band, but I know most people hated them. Dog Fashion Disco.
Sure. I like them too.
Another gimmick band.
Yep.
Kind of goofy, definitely were, I don't even know what you would call their gimmick.
I don't know either, yeah.
They were weirdos. They were like if Mr. Bungle had an abortion and it came back to life, it would be it would be Dog Fashion Disco. I personally liked them, but there was that time, like a second time, because when was LSD? Was what? 90s?
92. That was 92, yeah.
And the bands I'm naming are all like late 90s, early 2000s. Like Mindless Self-Indulgent, I think, was 2000.
2000-ish, yeah.
And I think Dog Fashion was in that time frame, too. I think there was a lot of trying to find... If you look at that time in music, because that's a little bit, especially the late 90s, that was after grunge, I think people didn't know what to do.
They didn't.
They just didn't know what to do, so everybody was throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. And some did, some didn't. But, yeah, and again, it goes back to the music. If Dog Fashion Disco would have made unbelievably great records, we just said Mr. Bungle. Say what you want about Mr. Bungle, but that debut album is about as good as anything in a weird record.
It's a great record, absolutely.
It's great, but it's odd.
Everything after that, not so much.
Yeah, that Hotel California or whatever.
California.
That's awful.
Disco Volante. Oof.
Ooh, yeah, well, I don't even know. That's like a smooth elevator music
record. It's not even music to me. It's noise, really, pretty much, man.
And even the thing that he just did with like Scotty and all them. Then
I
hated that.
Yeah, that was their demo. I mean, it's more metallic because they started out really heavy, and then they got more funky and weirdo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not like you said. I love that first album, but I'm not a huge. It's the Mike Patton stuff. I'm not this huge Mike Patton fan unless he's with Faith No More.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not that into his solo.
I try to be. I try. I mean, I think Mike Patton is arguably, him and Prince are probably the two most gifted musicians ever. But, and I know that's a huge statement that everybody will want to fight me on.
Yeah.
But, you know, I get that. But I mean, Patton, when he's on, there's nobody better. And when he's not, it's Disco Volante.
Exactly. Well, it's just, he's that.
He's an artist.
Yeah, exactly. He's an artist guy. That's my only thing with him is lyrically, it wasn't like his lyrics ever meant anything. And he'd say, like, even on his albums, they were just words. There was no like he was making no point or getting anything. Of course, he was
phrasing.
Yes, he's a very interesting individual in general. You know what I mean? Mike Patton, you know, so yeah, but I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I mean, the range is nobody that's got a range like that. I mean, fucking unbelievable what that you know could do on the guy could do on the vocals. But yeah, I think like you said, it's the fun stuff, like a bit like Elstorm, right?
Oh yeah,
they got that gimmicky, right, with the drunken pirate thing, you know, which I like. You know, obviously you had, you know, I mean, you know, Guar. I mean, obviously there's no bigger gimmick than Guar, but you know, then you've got that's the thing too. See, a band like Guar, I don't get me wrong. I mean, they've got great music, but you know, is it really great? I wouldn't say it's great music. I think they have good music. They have good music.
Name three Guar songs.
Well, I could Bring Back the Bomb.
Can you name three? I can't.
Yeah, Bring Back the Bomb, Sick of You, and
Scum Dogs of the Universe.
Yeah, exactly. There you go, history.
There's three. I mean, that's what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I guarantee you, the other 1,000 people that are listening to this or whatever couldn't name three.
Oh, you're right. And that's when I think listen, it's like Ghost. Can anyone name three Ghost songs? No,
I can't.
Don't care what anyone says.
Rats. That's one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Dance Macabre, I think, is another one.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, there's like not many, dude. I mean, I'm not, you know, but I think like, you know, the gimmick thing, I think I think it's good, but you know what happened obviously too in the 90s when you had all the new metal, you know, bands with the makeup and the masks, obviously, you know, I mean, obviously Mushroom Head, they were the first ones to do it. And you had Slipknot, you had Mudvayne, they all were doing it.
Sure.
You know, you had a lot of those industrial bands that were doing it. You know, Marilyn Manson was gimmicky. You know, obviously when he started out, he was a gimmick. He still, I guess, is. You know,
yeah,
but he's a character. You know, too.
He is.
You know?
He's just a character. But a lot of those that you're naming, especially in that industrial world, they all have cult followings.
Oh yeah.
You know Thrill Kill Cult and bands like that. I mean, they're still popular today.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they built a cult following based on their gimmick, and they've stuck to it, and it's work again. But they've got the music to back it.
Yes,
you know that's really the thing, I think.
Yeah, but then you have the serious gimmicks too, right? I mean, Amon Amarth is a bit gimmicky, right, with the whole Viking thing.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
So, but you know, it's more of a serious, you know, thing, a more of a historical thing, or you have a lot of the satanic occult type of gimmicks, you know, but or one of the best, I mean, gimmick ones you talk about funny though, Steel Panther, obviously, you know.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't, you know, that's obviously the whole Spinal Tappy thing.
Sure.
Yeah, Brujeria, right? There's a gimmick too, a bunch of Mexican drug lords, you know, with names and stuff,
right?
You know, with all the different
Cradle of Filth.
Cradle of Filth. Mm-hmm.
You know, their whole gimmick of, I don't know, what would you call that? Evil? I don't know that you call it satanic as much as just evil.
Just evil, I guess, or goblin-y or whatever the fuck it is, you know what I mean? Death Clock, there's another gimmicky band. You know what I mean? Which, I mean, it's all, like I said, there's a ton of, but like like you said, the bottom line is as long as the music is good, it you know, and can stand the test of time, I don't even care about the gimmick. You know, like I'll look at it like a Life, Sex, and Death. Like, look, I know Stanley's there, but my thing is like, this guy's got a great voice. I wasn't even sitting there like, ooh, look at Stanley or whatever. It's like, no, I just like the songs. You know what I mean? It's like, and the gimmick comes secondary.
Yeah. If the gimmick comes first, then the band almost never has staying power.
Absolutely.
Guar being the exception. Or Kiss. I think Kiss. But Kiss, as much as I don't like Kiss, I understand that they have a zillion hits. So
exactly.
Kiss, I guess the music does meet. But, I mean, how many Necrogoblicon songs can you name? That's an all gimmick band.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's all gimmick, and nobody can name a single song, you know, or
Yeah.
Because they don't have the music to match. Same with like Max Sabbath.
I was just going to say them exactly.
That's a gimmick. It's funny as shit.
It's funny. Mm-hmm.
But again, let's name 3 songs. That's right. None of us can.
Exactly. And they're they're spoofs off of Black Sabbath songs anyway. So
Right.
Not really a serious band, obviously, but like I said, a fun band.
Yeah,
you know,
they're entertainment, not a.
There you
to
go.
me, they're a show, not a band.
Exactly. No, I agree too. Yeah, it's. I mean, you got the Sleep Token. That's a newer band. That's starting to, they're a gimmicky band with a mask. I mean, my thing too is if you're gonna do a gimmick, it's got to be original. I mean, how many fucking bands are gonna wear masks and different outfits? It's like. It's okay, but you got to have like some rhyme or reason of what you're doing. What does it represent? Instead of just a bunch of guys going out there looking like goofballs, putting on outfits. Yeah, you remember like they had that. What was that one? That red jumpsuit apparatus and all these fucking bands. I mean, it's like that was just a way to just try to really. You're basically screaming, our music is not good enough to get attention, so please make this work. Hopefully this will get people to look at us.
Right.
I mean, and let's be honest, except for Kiss, I mean, and I guess Bowie, there was really no gimmicks back in the day because, it didn't, back then you didn't have the
Cooper.
Yeah, Alice Cooper, you're right. Obviously, how can I forget about that? Obviously, yes, he was one of the originals. But it wasn't until MTV really came about where the gimmick thing took a whole nother, I mean, you could sit there and let's be honest, you could say that the whole Sunset Strip thing, all those bands were all gimmicks. The Motley Crue and Poison and everything. I mean, in a way, they were gimmicks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they were, because they were on the Strip. They're wearing jeans and biker jackets, and then they put on the leather and the makeup and the mascara and the big hair, to play their gigs. They definitely that was just one big old gimmick. But again, the music generally
backed it up for the
backed it up.
Some of it did, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think some of it less. Yeah, that's weird that you say that you question back then. I will say it did back it up at the time, but it didn't stand the test of time.
Exactly, to stay in power.
Because like Motley Crue, we could throw Motley Crue out there. At the time, we loved them.
Absolutely.
Now you go back and listen to it.
I know.
Everything but like Shout at the Devil, really? If you go back and you listen to Girls, 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 you're just like,
ugh.
What the fuck was I listening to that I even bought this thing? And went to shows and everything else to see them do their live performance of Dancing on Glass or what. It's like, what's wrong with me?
I know.
The gimmick wore off. And that's and again, you got to give it to the titans of it, the Alice Coopers, especially Alice Cooper. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Alice Cooper in any way, shape, or form. But I respect him to death. That 50 years later, he still can play shows, still get up there and grind babies, and do his whole thing, and have his band all covered with blood and torn up, ripped clothes, and cutting off heads and all that other nonsense.
Yeah.
Never has he wavered, and never has his popularity gone down.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, he was the OG. I mean, there's no doubt he was the one that kind of really kicked it. Because he was before, I believe, Kiss.
Oh yeah.
So
early
60s,
70s.
Right?
Yeah,
those early 70s, 70s.
Yeah, right
70s,
in there. I think the first album was 70, maybe
Okay.
earlier. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Again, not a fan, so I don't.
Yeah, same here. I'm not a fan musically, but
But you respect it.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? I guess Bowie might have been the first one with all the different characters, but not really for metal. Obviously, that was classic rock. But it's just like you said. I think it all depends on what the gimmick is. So going back to the Stanley thing, the thing I like about it, is that it's a very original thing. I mean, and he played it up, I think, great. If this guy really did smell, like everyone said, he fucking reeked of piss and, whatever it was. I mean, they said he would go outside, they'd see him, he'd be jerking off, You know what I mean? He jerked
Wow.
off on himself. He went all the way. He takes shits and not wipe his ass. He take a shit in the fucking in the grass or whatever in the fucking next to the tree and not wipe his ass. So he did it in front of people where it's like, wow, they actually were believing that this guy, and that was more of that. What do you call that? What do they call that thing when you're like trying to act like the person in real life? You know, not method acting, but something. I forget the term. You know what I mean? But some Hollywood acting term thing. But you know, just trying to really just morph into this real, I guess, character for people to believe it. You know, like I said, I guess she'll do anything, especially at that point in time. Bands did anything just to separate themselves. You know, and like you said, though, in a way, I kind of missed that stuff. Because it does build up a mystique.
Sure.
You know, and I think that's important when you're a band and you've got a mystique. That, I mean, and then like it still is with this, you know, even though it's just one record that, you know, still not a ton of people have learned about, but it's still there, that mystique. People still like, well, where is this guy? I want to hear him do an interview. I mean, he's never done a fucking interview to this day and talking about it, you know?
Right. Well, dude, how much do you think people's, especially musicians who have this unbelievable need for attention, how much do you think social media has made it so that you can never have that again?
I know. That's a good point.
Because I mean, even just Ghost is not that old. Were they 10 years old roughly?
A little bit long, about 12 or so, yeah, but not super old. No,
but I mean, we've known Tobias. We've known that it's him for
good 8 years,
5,
now, probably,
7
right?
years,
6, 7 years, yeah.
And I mean, now there's that band Priest. That's the other guys that got kicked out of Ghost.
I know.
And it's, you know, but it's their need for attention.
Yep.
Nobody goes to this level that you're talking about with this Stanley guy anymore. No way.
No, that's over the top, dude.
Dude, even Kiss. It was, 20 years before we ever saw a photo of them without makeup.
Was it 20?
It was a long time. Maybe not 20, but it was a long time.
It was at least 10 plus years, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time. They played that mystique up. You know, everybody remembers the cover of Unmasked where they pulled the mask off and they still had the makeup on under the mask.
That's why they had masks on to begin with too. We realized because they were ugly as fuck, but you know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah.
But so if Kiss would have had social media, they would have unmasked 2 years into their career.
Yeah. Well, you know what's kind of funny? It always seems to when they get unmasked, it's always from another musician. Like Tobias, it was what's his face from Behemoth, Nurgle, who posted the picture up on social media,
of course,
and boom, then it's done. Now everyone knows him, and then it's too late. You know, he had to kind of come out, I guess, and be himself.
But all these guys, and all these guys, they always want to share who they are. When it gets any kind of popularity, then they want the credit.
Sure,
Brugeria, another, you know. Those guys went a pretty long time where nobody really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it was
and
Dino.
then all of a sudden it's like Dino's like, oh yeah, when I'm doing, I have gigs with Brugeria. You know, it's like, all right, dude, stop.
Yeah, well,
you just wrecked it.
It was him. Was it Shane Embury from Napalm Death was in it? Yeah. Billy Gold from Faith No More was the bassist. I mean, it's true. They did it, and now there's nobody in it except for the singer who's been there for, since it started.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it came out, you're right. It was that gimmicky secret, But like I said, once again, what did it do? It creates that mystique. Yeah,
well, look at Sleep Token. Sleep Token is pretty good. I don't think they're great musically. Yeah. I think they're pretty good.
They're okay, yeah, they're okay.
But they're getting attention because nobody's sure who they are.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And 2 years from now, when some social media picture shows them backstage drinking a beer or whatever, then it's going to be over.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like with Slipknot. Right, yeah, we didn't see them for years, until Stone Sour.
And once we started seeing them, then it was like, all right, it's done.
It's done. See, that is the key. I mean, it really is. If you get, I'm saying caught, but if you get discovered and people are like, that's the guy, it's almost like a lot of times it's like, okay, well, that was fun. We figured out who it was. Okay, now next. You know what I mean?
Well, and Slipknot seems stupid now. It seems stupid that we see Corey all the time.
With a mask,
and then he puts the mask on to do Slipknot gigs. That seems like the new guy Eloy that just joined from Sepultura. We've seen him for 30 years. They didn't hide who he was. They put out a press release, hey, it's Eloy, but here he is in a mask.
Wearing a fucking mask. I know, dude.
Why? Why does he need a mask?
I think, I'm with you. Once you get discovered and people figure out who you are, just fucking take it off. I mean, because it's done, and then just become, Look, and once again, your music then should be able to speak for itself. not the gimmick. If your music's that good, it'll speak for itself. Look, I could say that with Slipknot, right? Let's just think of Slipknot. Can you think most people could name 5 Slipknot songs?
Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, most of the gimmick bands you kind of can't.
Yeah.
You know, which is interesting too. You know what I mean? Now I think with LSD here, Life, Sex, and Death, they've only got one album. You know what I mean? So people who do know can, I think, they will know.
They could probably name all 12 songs or whatever. But
and like I said, and I think the key with them is everybody has seen them. Always says just what a phenomenal live band they were. Not just good, they were fucking like unbelievably good. And like I said, so. It's an interesting thing, like I said, I'm looking forward to talking to Alex if he does show up. But it'll be interesting to pick his brain of just to get sort of in the head of, and it was interesting to see if they'll even talk about it. See, a lot of times these bands they don't want to give up the quote unquote ghost, no pun intended, of, why they did it. They want to kind of still keep it a little there. So not to really give up the whole kit and caboodle type of thing, you know what I mean? Where people still keeps them guessing and still interested in the band, because they did re-release a remastered version of vinyl, a double, album of it, and it I think just completely sold out, fucking very, very fast.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a band that I'm telling you, I think you're gonna probably hear a little bit more about them if they ever decide, I think, to play a show together. But I don't think they will. I don't think the Stanley guy is interested in ever doing it, and we'll go to his grave with it.
And if he's a professional now, he really can't do it.
If that is the case, then yeah, you don't want nothing to probably people to know at all that's your. You should go just if you check out those little videos with Chuck's Chips Enough in them. You could see he's not like they're like this is him. And he's kind of like, oh, let me put my sunglasses on. Like he does not want to fucking be discovered. You know what I mean? It's pretty, It's pretty interesting, but that I think it. But now, would you think it'll work today if people did it? I mean, obviously, if you got the backing of like a band like Sleep Token, they got a lot of money behind them. If you've got the money behind you, I guess it could still work, but do you think people really are intrigued by that anymore? Is that something that's really just because of, like you said, social media and whatever? And we've seen the last big one we've probably seen is Ghost, right? I mean, they're the last big one,
and that was at the beginning of social media.
True. Yeah.
Today, if somebody comes out without a mask or whatever, you're going to have every investigative sleuth out there figuring out who they are. Look at when again, I'll go back to the Slipknot with Eloy. There was one picture they showed like a square or something off a tattoo on his arm, and you had 400 sleuths going, "Oh, it's the same as in this video."
That's true.
I don't think it would have to be a true unknown.
You're right,
and I just don't see it. And again, who's to say? Who's to say that it could never happen? But I don't know that we need it anymore. Really, there's so much. That's a whole nother thing too. Is there's so much media now that is there really need for something that's goofy? You can go to 4,000 different channels of goofy. You can go to Twitter and find anything you can think of. You know, I mean, if you think of a guy dressed as a rabbit with a snake out his ass, you could probably find it on Twitter.
That's true, man.
That's what's going to shock people now.
Well, not only that, you're right. Well, that's a great point. Everything's been done already, right? So what's going to be new and shocking? And the thing is the reason why a lot of the bands did it was just to stand out. And there's not labels in LA and New York sitting there going to these, A&R guys and all these shows looking for the next big thing anymore. So really, are you going to go through all that? It's not comfortable playing in those things for one, and are you going to go through all that just to quote unquote get a little attention? I mean, it almost seems a bit silly now where it did seem legit and understandable and it added to the entertainment back at one point in time, especially when MTV came out, because that's what people wanted to do, right? It was all visual, so they hey, we got to up our visual here. Obviously, until the '90s, and but even during the '90s, it was still going on. Just a couple years there with the whole Nirvana thing, but in the grunge. But yeah, interesting. It's just interesting, concept with the whole gimmicky thing. And
I still think the next gimmick is going to be the mishmash of live and AI. Like hologram with AI generated sounding vocals, not as the lead. I don't think you can get away with AI as the lead. But I think if you could have a really strong vocalist and a bunch of AI characters, and the AI characters in the backgrounds could morph, morph from sounding a little bit like the Eagles here, and a little bit like Slipknot here, and a little bit like I don't know, Cannibal Corpse here, where it could be very unique. It would be a unique new meld of musical sounds.
Sure.
And you know as well as I do, this dumb industry is looking for any way they can to use AI so they don't have to pay anybody.
Absolutely.
So it would shock me none if that's not the next wave. Is you get one guy, one computer, like a 9-inch, like a Trent Reznor guy
that does everything,
that does all kinds of, but also envisions that type of a thing, and uses the AI to build his quote unquote band. But it's really a digital thing that they sell more to Oculus than they do to stages.
Sure.
That's what I think would be next.
It could be like that guy. You remember that guy a handful of years ago who faked his band and had this whole tour booked in
Oh
Europe
yeah.
and
I
the
forget
UK.
who that was. Yeah.
Oh man, that was He didn't have a real band. He just that shows you what the internet can do. You can really believe fucking anything to this thing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that is a good point about AI. That's just a whole nother a beast that we don't know what the fuck's going to come of that. I mean, we're just getting started with that. And, I mean, but yeah, people need to buckle up on that because you're right. That's going to be I mean, or you've got like you even have I mean, look at the Static X with their gimmick now with this fake Wayne Static thing. Is that going to be like you said? You're right. The holograms, right? Like the Kiss holograms.
Yeah,
you're right. That's going to be the new thing.
That's the new thing because they'll never die.
It's true. You're
Dude,
right.
if you were a big band,
like
I mean, if you were a big band, if you were Metallica, why stop making money? You just put out you get them to take some videos of you. Metallica has every show they've ever recorded. You feed all of that into a computer and say, here, give us the best kick-ass concert we could possibly put together, and hologram that shit, and then send it around the country for $50 a ticket.
Well, I think the new, what's the name of that place? The Sphere or whatever that's in Vegas
the Sphere.
now?
Yeah.
Well, I think, and this is just my, call me conspiracy, whatever, but I really believe that when you've got, like, for instance, YouTube playing there, you can't even see them on the stage.
Yeah, the stage is too big, or the
I mean, these guys could go out. You could put fucking body doubles out there and fucking people in masks and looking like these guys because no one's seeing them.
Yeah,
there's not like I haven't seen any video of any bands that have played there where they're showing them there because it's all about that big screen. Where you could put anyone out there, fake people, that's them, and you could just say it's them and it's not them.
Put them out there good as long as you got good soundtrack to it, you'd be fine.
That's it. You just fucking put on a fucking tape and let that roll, backtracks, let them roll, and that's your concert right there.
Yeah. By the way, the band that faked their thing was called Threaten.
Threaten? That was
L.A. band Threaten from 2018.
I just that came in my mind like a week or so ago, and I was trying to remember that. I just remember we had talked about that. I think it was when we started. I remember this show about 4 years ago during the pandemic. That was a thing. That was nuts. That was nuts. That whole thing. But anyway, so to get me things interesting here, and hopefully, like I said, we'll Alex Kane from Life, Sex, and Death will. We'll do this interview and we can maybe dig a little more into that. But yeah.